the Tribunal was a terrible punishment system for League of Legends, and I'm kind of glad that it's gone. Now, for those that don't know what the Tribunal was, it was a system back in Season 1, 2, and I think 3 as well, too, to where players could punish their own player base. So it would be reports that are sent, there'd be a cumulative number of reports on a player, specific player, whatnot, and then it would get sent over the tribunal once it reaches this certain threshold of reports. And so players would then review these cases, maybe it would be 4 or 5 different cases on a single player, and then they would punish or pardon the player. Now, the problem with this is that I don't think the jury is well equipped in order to do something like this, in order to do something like the tribunal. I think it was a very bad idea, and it was kind of a loophole for them to try and crowdsource intelligence instead of just trying to handle it themselves. Now, the problem with the tribunal is the jury, right? That's the problem in most trial cases, you could say, because the human mind is very subjective. Now, there was a study from the Northwestern University, I think it's like in Illinois, that showed that 1 of 8 trials had an incorrect verdict, whether, either punishing or not punishing someone. So it was in both spectrums. Now, this study did have some faults because it did its best in trying to compare the judge's verdict to the jury, and so they had a different amount of percentages, but it assumed that the judge's knowledge or judge's verdict was as good as the jury's verdict, so he could never be a lower percentage or whatnot. And this sample size was like 271 cases, and it was in partnership with the National Center for State Courts. So it's pretty credible sources. And I'll link that in the description below so that you can check it out if you want. But I found it pretty shocking. 1 in 8 cases, it's quite a lot. And so then it goes to say that, well, are these players in League of Legends even qualified to comment about these games? Because that's the big issue. Now, there might be something game related and some game issues that they don't understand. Maybe their game knowledge isn't at a high level, or like someone playing a full AP Singed, and then someone in the chat says this guy's trolling, like he's throwing the game. And now, he could very well be 0-13, but that doesn't mean he's intentionally doing it. So, context is for kings. Without sufficient game info, like what the players are currently doing in-game at those specific times, then sometimes it may be difficult to know if what they're doing is wrong or incorrect. And then you have the mental state of the person doling out the punishment. Maybe they're in a terrible mental state. Maybe they just broke up with their girlfriend. Maybe they played a game with a troll. You don't know. And so it creates this skewed idea that maybe they could go into the tribunal already pissed off, already tilted, and so they're more likely to be less forgiving. And then you have ranked queues. It could be worse due to the pressure, like in the cases. And so you have these players dealing with this different type of pressure, and so they get tilted, and so they lash out in chat or whatnot, which, it might even be a mild lash, but they're just trying to win the game, and so they're doing criticism or something, and so someone finds that as negative, and maybe the person reviewing the tribunal finds it negative as well too. And then lastly, there are the probably rare cases, but I still believe there are some out there that are just looking to do the tribunal as like a power monger, right? Someone who just wants to feel in control. A lot of people talk about the Reddit mods and how, well, Reddit mods actually don't get paid, right? So they're just there for the power instead. They're there for, to feel superior over someone. And so this could be the same case. You get players or people that go into the tribunal that want to exert their power, and this is one way that they do it. And so they themselves feel important. They also feel like they're higher in the hierarchy of players or whatnot because they're dealing the punishments or some demented, twisted justice. And so these are the big faults with the tribunal and the jury. And then the tribunal also rewarded people for with IP or BE for the new players. Blue Essence back in the day was called IP. But they rewarded people for doing it. So you would review like 10 cases, and then they would give you a certain amount of IP. And so some people would just do this and just spam through the cases and not really care. So that in itself kind of skewed the whole system, and they probably shouldn't have rewarded people for even doing the tribunal. And then there's the big elephant in the room of Riot's rules for the tribunal, because they are about as arbitrary as humanly possible. So one of their rules in the FAQ was, why doesn't Riot post a rules list for what you can be banned for? This was like one of their questions in the FAQ. And their response was, we believe in giving the community what it needs to define itself, and that includes what is acceptable or unacceptable behavior. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to kind of let the community bring their own morals and ethics into it, and therefore create it themselves. But this doesn't set even remotely any guidelines as to what we should look out for when we're doing these tribunal judgments. And so you have no baseline in which to judge these people other than what you believe is correct or incorrect, right? And so you have different people coming from different backgrounds, ethnicities, values, age, and they're going to have completely different views on what they deem is acceptable. So you're just getting this wide array of different people that may or may not have these types of values. And not only that, but you inherently draw specific types of people into the tribunal because it's this voluntary thing. And so you draw this specific personality type into doing the tribunal, whether it be those people that are power mongers or people that have this idea of justice. And so it kind of warps and skews the idea of what is acceptable and what is not. And then, of course, there is the going back to the jury. I think another large aspect could be age as well, too. We just touched on that. Now, who knows exactly what age is drawn to the tribunal? I have no idea. I would assume, somewhat older because, the kids just want to play the game or whatnot. But there creates this difference in age, and maybe someone who is younger is less tolerable to a toxic environment versus someone who is older is, accepting of that because that's an environment that they grew up, playing old school games, people shit talking or whatever. So there becomes this difference on what metric that they're judging from based on their specific age. So this in itself becomes a problem too. So I just think there are several different problems with Riot's whole idea with the jury being a good idea and a correct idea, because it's far too changing, too malleable, and just it should draw a specific type of people. And then they go on to say in their FAQ that, we strongly believe that it's not okay to retaliate. Well, not everyone has that same viewpoint. Not everyone shares that. And not only that, but who the hell is going to read this FAQ anyway? like, yeah, sure, technically you're supposed to read, the FAQ, you're supposed to read the fucking terms of service to even play the game, but no one does. So who's to say that anyone's even going to read any of these rules? So then it becomes to this point of, well, okay, some people might believe that it is okay to retaliate, and some people may not. And so whether Riot says this or not, I don't think necessarily matters, because people are going to do whatever they want to do. And then there is often a group mob mentality that can happen in games where a player starts to blame the game on one person, and so all players team up and disavow that person or the original person who was blamed. Now, this can be reflected in tribunal cases and may skew the perception of whoever is reviewing it, especially if retaliation is not advised, right? Because, well, if one person is completely silent and four people are just saying that this person is wrong, this person's trolling, this person's, doing stuff incorrectly or bad for the game, then he has no defense for himself. And even Riot doesn't want him to have this defense. So I just think all of Riot's system for the tribunal was quite bad. Well, not everything, because the endpoint was the best thing about Riot's system, was that the endpoint for banning someone. This was the best thing about it, because it acted as jury, the tribunal, but Riot was still involved and they had the final decision to ban someone. So it would still go through an actual person before banning someone. So that was probably their best stopgap in order for things to not get too corrupt or too wild. But I think currently we have a better system in place. I mean, we have a precursor computer system that, goes out, finds everything, and then brings it to Riot's player support team, that then they curate those errors and then they dole out the true punishment. And now ideally this player support team should be people that are well educated in terms of ethics and morals and how to handle that within the online space. They should be, they should be taught about philosophy or about morals or whatnot, and how to act both, in an online space or outside of an online space. So I think that's just a better system. I think the tribunal was a terrible idea, and I think it was a crutch for Riot to develop something in the meantime, because they probably just didn't have enough funds or didn't have enough staff. But I am very glad to see the tribunal stop. And although they said they were updating the tribunal system, that post has been really long time now in the past. It's probably like 3 years old now. So I hope they don't update it. I hope they get rid of the tribunal, because I don't think the community is well equipped in order to handle a task like that.